that's the whole point of the First Amendment, essentially, right? Is to
Yes.
say that like you get to use religious freedom as a shield, but not as a sword. As soon as you are reaching out there and touching other people with your religious freedom, it's no longer your religious freedom. You're now the religious oppressor. And that's kind of the antithesis of what this country was founded on.
Welcome to Seriously, the podcast that dives into the baffling,
We can't send them to a prison where there's animals, where there's livestock.
the ridiculous,
Like omelets better than sex.
and downright unbelievable political climate in red states like Louisiana.
So we can't go there. There are no vegan jails.
Seriously. Seriously.
Welcome to Seriously. We're your host. I'm Michelle. And today we have the wonderful Dylan Wagasback as our guest. Dylan and I have known each other for a really long time. Dylan's done pretty much everything that you could think of in the Louisiana political legislative arena. So we're really excited to have you on because you're funny and I love you. But yeah, do you want to tell the people anything else about you that they should know?
Well, and because you've lived to tell. I mean, like, it's with that introduction, the fact that, like,
I've
you're
survived
even,
it.
yeah, exactly. Like, sentience
Yeah.
and all. Huge accomplishment.
What a lovely introduction. Yeah, I guess I was actually thinking about this on the way into my studio today, and I realized that I really have done a stupid amount of like bizarrely different jobs in Louisiana politics, like from like working inaugurations and like events management stuff to just like being the wildly, vastly underqualified backdoor VIP security guy at like a Mary Landrieu rally that Hillary Clinton was going to be speaking at. Like that's the range here. And those are just the short-term gigs. So yeah, I lived inside of Louisiana politics for a long time, and now I have more distance, but it's been exciting to get back involved this year supporting Lyft around some communication stuff.
We've been so grateful to have you. Okay, so as you know, we start our show off with the crap that has made us think seriously this week. Dylan, do you have
A lot
one?
of times we do guests first. I mean, when we're trying to be polite, which is not most of the time.
I mean, it was the vote on 121 was this past week, right? Time has collapsed, so it's really hard for me to place that in the timeline. But yeah, I mean, I sat in here and I watched on video as nearly every Black member of the Louisiana House of Representatives spoke just beautifully and eloquently and passionately to their colleagues, many of whom I think they said out loud and have been in relationship with as friends, to not vote in a way that denied their humanity and denied their, like their community the right to representation. And then we watched them just do that, and I think it's not even the doing so much as the sitting there and knowing all of us together, right, in the legislators in the room, everyone at their computers, the folks in the gallery, exactly how that was going to go, and just still having to sit through that and know that that was coming. So that was maybe kind of a heavy one, but that was it. That was to me, that was the week.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, one seriously that I've been thinking about is sort of related to that, just more on the chaos and what the fuck side is that, I mean, the Calais plaintiffs have apparently sued already with the new map. In Alabama, with their maps, Black voters sued, and that map has been blocked, that it is intentionally racially discriminatory. I don't know what will happen with the new lawsuit with the, on the new maps with the Calais plaintiffs, but this is like per the usual now with the John Roberts court, that like they're just creating fucking chaos. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, with the timing of this, obviously, that was going to create chaos, like no matter what. But, lawsuits were going to be inevitable, whether they're successful or not. That's just the way our system works with things like this that are really important. So, the degree to which that could also throw things into disarray. And I'm kind of like, as the Supreme Court, they didn't like, they don't like this test. They don't like that test. We didn't like the old test. Let's do a new test, whatever kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, do we now have a test where, like, essentially, like, it's impossible to have a constitutional map? Like,
I'm not
because
clear on what
everything
the
basically.
rules are anymore. Yeah,
Oh, I don't mean. Yeah.
there's no rhyme or reason to any of it anymore. Now that both racism and so-called reverse racism are,
In
both
play.
considered
Yeah.
unconstitutional. There isn't
Yeah,
any,
exactly.
like,
So,
I mean, the
I
point
don't.
has been made very clearly. There's no such thing as a race-blind political map,
Mhm.
right? That doesn't exist. That's not an actually achievable goal, and it's not something that anyone should be working toward. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. And I think it was really clear that this was actually the outcome that they were hoping for with the Calais map, right? They wanted it
Mhm.
to go all the way up. They wanted the court to
Oh,
look
yeah.
at it and say, no, that this was racial gerrymandering, right? And so, that's been the end game this entire time. And I don't know, fingers crossed for Alabama, that they do something
Yeah.
differently, right? But in the meantime, we're setting precedent for the entire country. But in
Mm.
one of the, three states, I think, where the impact of that precedent is the most significant.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, my suspicion is that it really will depend on the circuit court district that you live in,
Yeah.
as to whether a map that includes Black representation is okay, or whether excluding Black people, like Black representation, is okay. I think it's going to just continue to be chaos.
Yeah, and I mean, probably along those lines that the Supreme Court will have to weigh in on that a little sooner than they thought. Like,
Hmm.
maybe real soon already. Alabama is not in the Fifth Circuit, they're in the 11th Circuit, which
Yeah.
actually is not that bad of a circuit, and particularly in comparison to ours. So,
Which is,
it's.
I mean, and that's how this gets in front of the Supreme Court, right? Is it creates a circuit split, and now there has to be an answer.
Hmm.
Because and Alabama is one of the other three. It's Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama are the three states where the most damage can be done because
Hmm.
we have the most significant populations of Black people in the
Mhm.
country, and that concentration allows them to, you know, just dilute the Black vote for the whole entire country in three states. In three states, they can do enormous amounts of damage.
Yeah, and I don't know what the evidence is in that Alabama case. I don't know, like, how hog wild the Alabama legislature went with just not, like, even, like, bothering at all to, like, try to hide the ball and what the intent was that they were doing. I mean, enough so that federal courts have stepped in, so that surprises me. But so we'll see. I don't know how strong the case is, but the concern, of course, things with intent challenges are hard. A lot because, like, once people get the memo that, like, it's not really all bets are off, you can't just actually say, like, we're doing this because we're racist and we don't want Black people to vote or whatever was being said, then yeah, just don't say that and you're fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Anyway,
my gosh.
wild times.
Yeah. I also love that the Supreme Court is constantly doing this, where they're like, we're going to make this really extraordinarily disruptive decision and then not give anybody any guidance on how they're supposed to implement it nationwide, and then get mad when, like,
Yes.
immediately it causes chaos and more cases come back up to them. They're like, well,
Oh, yeah,
we
no,
already, yeah.
there will definitely be the usual consternation from them that they were clear. Oh, they were clear about blah, 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 and whatever. Yeah, like basically everything. I mean, so not everything, but I mean, it's similar with Dobbs that, like, I don't know, folks, when you overturn huge precedent and put something either there's nothing in place or that's something that is confusing in place instead, then because you think there's been too much litigation, it's one of your complaints, and it's been hard to deal with that litigation, then what do you think is going to come next? We're talking about people's fundamental rights. You think people are just going to be like, oh, well,
I feel
Yeah.
like that used to get more consideration in the judiciary also, is like how
Yes.
disruptive could, various outcomes or various decisions be to to communities, right? Or to governments or to, whatever. I feel like we used to hear more in court decisions, in opinions about like part of why we're not going to do the thing that we're being asked to do is because it would be incredibly disruptive.
Yeah, so that is one of the factors in stare decisis. That's what you're thinking of. So it used to be that the court cared about that at all.
It seems
But
like
yeah, it's
not so
like
much anymore.
reliance basically. Like how much has society relied on this? So
Right.
there was argument about that in Dobbs. I mean, with Calais, I guess, they're claiming that they aren't overturning anything, but anyway, they don't care. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. There being predictability is the whole point of precedent. And certainly when it's something long standing and fundamental, like we're talking about, then the stare decisis analysis, that is supposed to be a big part of it.
All right. Well, I have a one to bring us back to our center of laughter and
Thank you.
absurdity. Okay. The country is turning 250 years old this year. And I'm honestly devastated that Trump is our president during this period because I mean, everything about how he wants to celebrate this is just disturbing, upsetting. I'm not even excited about it. This should be something that we're all excited about. I think most of us that are not in the like Trump camp are not excited. Like, I'm not feeling particularly patriotic at this point. But this week, they announced musical acts for this celebration that they're planning.
Okay.
Is this the M&A one?
Cowboy
The one
mouth.
where there's the fight on the lawn?
Cowboy Mouth is not on the list, but it is it is basically the worst of MTV, like in the early mid 90s.
It's 90s summer.
Okay.
That's
Yeah,
it?
exactly. Yeah. Okay. So we have Martina McBride, not on MTV, but
That
a
makes me really
CMT.
sad, actually.
I know. Although I don't really remember any of her songs. That was more of like a Trisha Yearwood in the 90s.
She did
Reba McEntire.
Independence Day, which I think Glenn Beck or someone horrible used as their intro theme song, but is actually about a woman who is being abused by her husband who burns down the house with him in it. And it's a great song.
Man, you got to love a good country music female revenge story. I love those.
Yeah, although if she let Glenn Beck use the fucking song and she's going to the MMA fight on the lawn,
that's when we knew. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it gets better.
Yeah.
It gets better. Okay. Let me just run through the rest of these and then we can have a global conversation about it. All right. CNC Music Factory, because Trump is just a squirrel who's trying to get a nut to move your butt. I mean, whatever that is. That's my favorite line from that song. Okay. Vanilla Ice, Milli Vanilli, which only one of them I think is still alive. And also they never performed really anyway. Young MC, Bret Michaels, and then the only one that is probably a recent history performer is Flo Rida. Yeah. I mean, but this lineup is ridiculous. Like you would not.
Flo Rida would play anywhere, though. I feel like Flo Rida played a show
Maybe.
on LSU's campus, and also I think I've seen posters for like Flo Rida at Pensacola Beach before. I think we're saying
at the Floribama.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, this could be the title of this list could be washed up stars also. So, people who used to be famous could be the like people you haven't heard of in at least 20 years. Yeah.
Oh my
Like with
God.
Bret Michaels, I haven't heard of him since the last thing he did. That was when he was the washed up star, which was a really good show, by the way.
Oh my God, I loved Rock of Love
That's
so much. So
that was already pretty like, oh wow, like he was a big fucking deal in the late 80s at least.
I will tell you, of the people on this list, two of them I actually did see perform live in the early '90s. So Milli Vanilli, saw Milli Vanilli live. Also saw Bret Michaels, but with Poison, and so
Yeah,
it was
obviously.
Poison and Slaughter. I think was the opener for that show. It was
I
great.
love Poison. Yeah. Yeah.
It was the Unskinny Bop tour. That was
Okay.
That's some insight into your past.
Yeah, we have similar taste in music, so
it was
you
more
can take
like
that
I
for what
lived in Monroe and very few artists that weren't country music artists played anywhere near us to actually be able to go to a concert. So
That's
we
so
took what
fair.
we could get.
Well, I just went out on the fucking, it's the 250th birthday thing. Then it's also this summer my 50th birthday. I'm a bicentennial baby. So like it really annoys me. Like you should not be besmirching any like 76 type of year. Us bicentennial folks should be able to celebrate, get some real joy out of turning 50.
I love that you feel some ownership of that.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, of course. I feel ownership over many things that I should not,
I think
or that I
my
have no right to.
I think my favorite thing about the whole 250 situation is the news that the Treasury has just in case drafted up some mock-ups of a $250 bill with Trump's face on it, which like if I'm Donald Trump and I've been trying to make the case for the past year and a half that inflation isn't real, that feels deeply off message.
Mhm. Print it. Just start printing it, man.
Like
Everyone knows that's helpful for inflation.
no
I mean,
one
I don't
needs
think that he understands any economics, so he might think that
clearly
that's
not.
a good idea.
Yeah, but I also am like, no, maybe we do need a 250 if we're still going to be a cash economy at all. There's like a lot of old men in my life that carry around like $800 and $100 bills just every day because they just feel like they could need it, like something could happen and they might need cash, or like something could happen and their kid might need cash or whatever. And yeah, I just feel like that's not going as far as it used to for them. And so,
Mhm.
but these are all, these are all men in nice suits who are not going to want a bulky wallet with like $1,500 in $100 bills in it. And so
Mhm.
we need it for them more than anyone else in my mind.
It is I it is nice when men have cash. A lot of times men do have
I
cash.
do
That's
love
it.
that about
But
men,
they're
actually.
Yeah, I do too. I agree.
It's funny because my daughter graduated from 8th grade like 2 weeks ago, and my grandfather, or I'm sorry, my dad, her grandfather, was like super excited to give her a crisp $50 bill. Like he went into the bank and requested a brand new $50 bill to give her as her gift. And she was like, cool. And then she handed it to me and she was like, can you just put this on my Apple Cash? Like, my my dad was like, devastated.
No appreciation of that. That's so
Oh, that's
funny.
so funny. She's like, "I can just give you the password next time, Papa, and you can just,
Yeah.
To be
log in
fair
and
to
put it on."
her, there's not a lot of places you could spend that.
Yeah, it's true. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we're going to go through the legislative session is wrapping up on Monday, and almost everything that we have been tracking is pretty much wrapped up. So we're going to start our like review of all of the fuckery that happened in this session today. We're not going to do a deep dive into pregnancy centers because we're going to have Representative Mandy Landry on in the coming weeks. So we'll do that with her. And then we're not going to also talk a lot about the redistricting stuff because next week we are going to have Senator Royce Duplessis on to talk to us about that. So today I thought that we would kind of go through like the anti-abortion agenda and how things ended up for them this session, some of the anti-LGBTQIA plus legislation, and then talking a little bit about some of the weird parental rights stuff that's going on. Okay, let's start with the anti-abortion stuff. At the beginning of the session, we talked about House Bill 288 that wanted to require an update to medical terminology regarding miscarriages, so that miscarriage would be the term that's used in conjunction with spontaneous abortion, which is currently the medical term that's used. That bill did end up passing, but it was amended so that it's now voluntary. It's not required. But I don't know. I just noticed this today that Rep. Boyer, who introduced that, also passed a study resolution to request that LDH evaluate the use of these terms, these miscarriage terms. So
Like, what? I mean,
I know.
what is that? These people and their fucking study resolutions, man. I mean, Dylan, I would love to hear your thoughts on all the goddamn study resolutions. I mean, to be clear, sometimes they serve a really good purpose. I mean, they, both if you really need to study something, or if, with a bill that, yeah, you couldn't get through, you need more evidence, whatever. But like with this kind of crap, it's like, to me, they're just always coming up with stupid crap that's like not really, first of all, like, what's going to be studied? What are they going to study? And what's going to be the point?
This specific issue shouldn't matter enough for LDH to have to waste their time on it. And I think that
100%.
like both the outcome of that bill being amended to be more permissive than mandatory and the study resolution, like to me that paints a pretty clear picture of our messaging in opposition to this bill was effective. We told them it was going to create billing havoc, that
Mhm.
insurance companies and providers and billing specialists and full health systems were going to have like massive issues because the uniformity of the language that they use was going to be trashed when people started having to just write something different randomly, and no systems were actually being updated to match that and to make that make sense. And so I think probably what we're trying to find out is how true is that, so that we can come
Mhm.
back next year and say, well, LDH did a study, or the year after, right? And say, well, LDH did a study and actually, you know, like everyone who we called for input said that it wouldn't crash their system if they can't write spontaneous abortion anymore or whatever, which I don't think actually would be. I think people generally in medical billing are, I would assume, probably going to say, please don't,
Yeah,
because they
exactly.
already have the most hellish jobs in the universe, already have to deal with this kind of bullshit constantly. And
Yeah, I
it
mean,
is
you
true.
always yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, that's what I was gonna say. You always wonder with study resolutions like this that, like, are clearly politically motivated and where there's, like there's a desired outcome,
Mhm.
Right.
and when, with our current government that some of them love providing desired outcomes. But even still, I mean, our messaging on this, as we say in the law, had the benefit of being true.
Right.
So, unless they just call up, like, I don't know, a couple of right to life doctors and
Right.
ask them what they think.
The
Don't call
medical
any, like,
directors
big
of various
yeah,
pregnancy centers, maybe.
yeah, right, exactly. Then I would think that that Boyer's not gonna get an answer that, yeah, makes him think that the bill as proposed was a lot more feasible than he was told.
No.
Yeah, although LDH is trash and I wouldn't trust them on any study resolution. So
Yeah,
there's that.
There's
it
that.
depends on who does it, but yeah, they have never been on my list, never been on my list of trustworthy partners, as you
Yeah.
know.
I think
I've
they might be on the
probably sued
enemies
them
list.
more
There's
than anyone
a bunch
else.
of them are on the enemies list that I have here. Anyway,
You got like a
okay.
burn book, like a Mean Girls style burn book
We
with some
do, yeah,
LDH
kind of,
authors?
yeah.
Okay, that's great.
We have Ellie's enemies list. It's
Amazing.
yeah. Okay.
It's in bourbon, just for good measure.
Yes. Okay, let's talk about this stupid baby Olivia resolution, also a resolution. Okay, so this one passed. It was amended so that it now requires the state surgeon general to approve whatever video or materials that Bessie is going to use to teach the science of human growth and development.
Who is that? Is that like Ralph Abraham or something? Who is our state surgeon general?
Our state surgeon general is like an anti-vaxxer,
Evelyn.
super
Evelyn.
anti-abortion person.
No,
So
it's
that
yeah,
doesn't help
Evelyn
that
Griffin.
much.
No,
Okay.
So, but wait, so Bessie still has to approve it, but then the Surgeon General does too?
so Bessie
That's
has to incorporate this into the state content standards, but the surgeon general gets to approve whatever information or materials Bessie uses.
so this, I mean, I know one of the things that, you were working on and other folks was to try to get some sort of input into the approval process with Bessie. So this is where that ended?
This is where it landed. Yeah. We were trying to get, like the Louisiana State Medical Society,
Right.
the American Academy of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, like people with actual expertise, not just
Yeah.
ideologues that were appointed by the governor to a random position.
That right. I mean, obviously, that's my reaction also, but I don't know, Dylan. I mean, to me, it just like it's a bad precedent just in general. Like, why would we be having
Right.
people that at all, even if they were great, like from the government be approving school curricula? Can this person can veto what Bessie has approved? It sounds like that's crazy.
I'm wondering now, just based on that, like how much of my like the literal materials in front of me in high school were like Bessie vetted, right? Does schools and teachers any have any freedom to meet a set of educational standards with the materials that they are curating at any point? Like, is that, it just seems like a bananas to me that Bessie would have any role in choosing a specific internet video for
Yeah,
students to be watching in a classroom. Like, that is
I
stupid.
I agree,
That's
I agree.
stupid.
I said that from the beginning too, that I was like, "Bessie's supposed to set standards."
Mhm.
Like,
Not,
they're
yeah,
not
not
supposed to be
design
dictating
a
actual
course.
curriculum. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So, yeah, it's true. There's
No, it's very disturbing. So the next step in this fight is that we're going to need to do a lot of advocacy with Bessie. There is a video that meets all of the requirements of this stupid resolution that was actually produced by legitimate health professionals and experts that Bessie could choose and that hopefully could be approved. But yeah, having the Surgeon General and her like anti-vax, pro-birth agenda as part of this is not helpful at all.
I think, probably try the reasonable approach first, and then if that doesn't work, I think try to get I mean, it just depends on who's Bessie it's on Bessie, but, like, I would just then try to get them to approve the most batshit crazy leftist thing possible and just have Evelyn keep vetoing it.
It's like, oh, we can't get this done. Okay.
You can't yeah, if they won't if she won't sign off on something reasonable, then I mean, this is what I would do if I were in charge
Yeah.
and be like, "All right, we'll watch this."
Do you want to talk about Cruz's bill on the workplace?
The labor standards, the
Yeah.
behavioral. Yeah, let's do that. So,
Okay. This is House Bill 1137,
mhm,
which legitimizes workplace discrimination against trans people by protecting coworkers who are intentionally misgendering, dead naming, and undermining them in their workplace.
mhm. Yep. I think this really shows how, um, like, to me, it's a very good indicator of how far back the Overton window has shifted on this issue in Louisiana, in the legislature, even specifically, just in the past 6 or 7 years. Because, as recently as whenever the last couple of years Ryan Gaddy was in the Senate, I'm not sure what year that would have been, but as recently as then. So, my last few years doing sort of direct lobbying in that building, we would have Republicans telling us like that, like, okay, we're not going to vote for the employment non-discrimination bill that adds sexual orientation and gender identity, but also like if you know people who are getting fired for this, then like you need to tell us because we're lawyers and we'll represent them in a tort case, you know, under like intentional infliction of emotional distress. Like saying, you know, basically saying like we'll find a way to
Protect them.
use the law as it exists now to make sure that people know that it's not okay to fire someone for being gay or trans, right? And now instead of that, we're having, you know, these like massively like majority bodies vote to say that like employers have zero recourse in a situation where one of their employees is being harassed. They're not allowed to enforce any kind of behavioral professional standard in their workplace, or else they might get sued for discrimination.
Yeah, that's the part that was just so wild to me about this. I mean, to your point, obviously we've shifted from should we protect people, vulnerable people in this category, to should we protect people who are harming vulnerable people in this category? But beyond that, then like with Cruz, I mean, Cruz is a dumbass, but like he and others, and some of his other legislation has been this, in particularly in this space, has been weird like this too. Like the bill last year that even if parents want their child to be called by whatever pronouns, that the bus driver and the principal and whomever doesn't have to follow that. Like
Yep.
he's supposedly a huge parental rights person, right? And like with this, then I presume like most of the other staunch Republicans around there, he considers himself very pro-business. And this is definitely not a pro-business law. I mean,
Not at
it's
all.
just not. I mean,
It's
it will make things harder for employers. I don't think there's really any doubt about. I mean, depends on who your employees are, but like it takes away your ability to basically discipline people in the workplace over what, you know, like I mean, could just be a part of it that they're doing is misgendering somebody. I mean, just
right.
the whole thing is batshit from like a pro business perspective.
As like as stupid as this bill was too, I'm still not even convinced that he wrote it, because when he would present it to the committees that it had to go in front of, he couldn't explain what it what gendering was. He couldn't explain about pronouns. Just he tried to explain it using names instead of like if I'm, you know, Bill, but you want to call me Sue, and it's like that's not a pronoun, sir. That's like a whole different name. And so then committee members are like, so like like if I'm like if no one has ever called me this name before and they want to call what? Like no one could get it. And it's like you haven't spent that much time actually thinking about this at all, clearly. But then I'm like, but who's giving you model policy that's this dumb? Right? Like
Mm-hmm.
what horrible like most of the think tanks that are doing the evil work have whole teams of attorneys writing legislation that are decent at what they do. Even if what they do isn't
Yeah,
decent, they are decent at what they do, right?
yeah.
And this was not that. This was like something a high school civics student came up with for a horrible class project. Like it was bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's an interesting point. I mean, there are I mean, those the think tanks, yes, usually you can tell. You can also usually tell with Cruz. I don't know if I saw him presenting this bill on the floor, but when he's clearly reading like a script, which is
Yeah.
fairly common with this kind of thing,
And then
like
unable to answer questions.
yes,
Just fully
at
unable.
all. Yeah,
Yeah.
and unable to be off book at all, even like in his own comments. Like he's
Mhm.
just like, the Constitution says blah blah blah, whatever.
My other thing with this bill is that, like, I think part of what is so both frustrating and alarming to me is like people's willingness to accept a framing of non discrimination for this conversation at all, because
Mhm.
it is not an innate characteristic of a person to, to misgender people in their workplace, right? That's not something that every other thing that we put in the law as a protected class is a characteristic about a person that is innate to who they are, that is unchangeable for the most part, right? That is like, I think we could make some arguments about religion there and some, political affiliation, things like that. But for the most part, we're really talking about like a thing
It's
that is about
conduct.
who
It's
this person
conduct.
is, the
Yeah.
community they belong to, etc. And also it's about, is there a historical just pattern of discrimination
Right.
that has resulted in an adverse outcome for a community of people here.
Mhm.
And every other class that we protect, the answer is yes. So if we're going to start throwing shit in here like, it's employment discrimination to correct unprofessional behavior in your workplace, then it's like, okay, we can now pretty much say whatever we want about this. It's
Yeah.
illegal
It's a
to hire
really
people who
good
like
point.
baseball.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
it's
Well,
a
I mean,
really
I
good
think
point.
I also think that these bizarre religious arguments too, like Wilder was coming up with this, well, I'm teaching my kids like the Bible says that they're supposed to discriminate against them. This is Wilder's argument.
this is
In
how we know
support of
that
this
none of these
bill.
people have read a Bible.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
People have interpreted very strict roles for women in the Bible, correct?
It's also
So,
been used
like,
for
what,
races. I mean,
how do
there's
we
plenty.
stop this from being used to say that men could just tell women, why are you even here? Like, go back home and
Right,
have
because that's what
babies.
the
And
Bible told
because,
them.
yeah,
Right.
and any sort of disciplinary action against them would be against their religion
Well, we
because
talked
their
about this a
religion
little.
tells them that
Yeah.
women aren't supposed to be in the workplace with them. I mean, it's
You
insane.
right. At some point, then the reality is that you are allowed to hold horrible views. People are allowed to have horrible views, but that does not mean you're allowed to operationalize those views against other people in all contexts,
Yeah.
and certainly not usually in an employment one. So that's again like what Dylan's talking about, which I think is a really good point. That like this bill is about people's conduct. It's not
Yeah,
about like
not who
the
they are.
anything that's inalienable about them.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we ask people to do things that might go against their incredibly conservative, possibly nationalist religious beliefs all the time, and we accept those as professional standards in a workplace, right? You
Mhm.
can't go into a public school as a teacher and say that you don't think that women should be allowed to work. You can't do that, actually, right? And if that's against your religious beliefs, well, then there's really only one place of employment for you, and that's inside of your religion. And that, you have to segregate yourself into that life if like being part of polite society is against your religious beliefs.
Right.
That's the choice you have.
Or just make everyone's workplace a hostile work
Right.
environment.
Because also it's all of the Christian, and for that matter, like non-Christian faith communities that are welcoming and affirming of LGBTQ people see that as a core part of their statement of faith as well, right? And so at some point, if we're saying that like you get to exercise your religious beliefs by imposing them on your entire environment at all times, that creates a kind of a conflict of like, okay, whose religious beliefs are more important than others. That's the whole point of the First Amendment, essentially,
Mhm.
right? Is to
Yes.
say that like you get to use religious freedom it as a shield, but not as a sword. You
Yes.
can't, as soon as you are reaching out there and touching other people with your religious freedom, it's no longer your religious freedom. You're now the religious oppressor. And that's kind of the antithesis of what this country was founded on. And that's why it's also wild to me that it's always the Baptists that are sending Dr. Will Hall to testify for these bills, because the Baptist faith is the Christian faith that allegedly and historically does care the most about freedom of expression and freedom of religion and freedom from religion, because it's the same thing.
Hmm.
That's the core founding tenet of the Baptist faith.
Well, it
So
is going to
there's a
infringe on Dr. Hall if the if the pregnancy centers have to follow HIPAA light requirements.
Yeah.
that's
So
wild.
it's just who knows what will
Wild.
infringe on people's religious rights. It's very much, it's like the Supreme Court, like everything is like the the old pornography standard, like, I'll know
Yep.
it when I see it.
Yep.
Everything is standardless, basically. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, listen, we're gonna have you back on, Dylan. Let's go deep, deep, deep into how religion is being weaponized against people. Because that's kind of like I live for that conversation.
Yeah, let's talk about it. I've got all the inside scoop from back in the Project Blitz days when they started doing all this "In God We Trust" bullshit. So we can talk about those bills too.
Yeah, 100%.
You should consider scheduling that sometime that I can't be here. Not because I wouldn't want to have that conversation, but because Michelle will be like so excited. It'll be like a 3-hour episode that you guys can do and segment out in parts.
Yeah, we
Sounds
could.
good.
We could. Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, Dylan, we're gonna let you go.
All right. Thanks for having me
Thanks,
on,
Dylan.
y'all.
Thanks so much for joining
Be
us.
sure to tell us what the specials are, what the
Oh, I
9th
will.
summer specials
Absolutely.
are.
I'm excited I'll send y'all some pictures, actually. I'm excited to test these things.
I want a vegetarian one.
I'm making for sure Hey Arnold Palmer. So I'm excited. Yeah, it's gonna be great.
How
I mean,
fun.
if you've ever seen this man naked,
Yeah, apparently. Just ask
Arnold?
Trump.
I mean,
Do you
this is
remember
a
when
Trump
Trump was constantly talking about how Arnold Palmer had like
was
on the
well hung.
campaign trail about how he had a
Oh
big dick?
God, no! This is a reference to the cartoon with the kid with the giant football head on
Well,
Nickelodeon.
we'll see what people think.
Okay, we may have to rethink the branding on that one.
All right, Dylan, thanks.
All right, bye.
Oh my gosh. Okay. This episode's going to be a little all over the place, just so folks know. We wanted to have Dylan on. It was unfortunately that we had a limited amount of time, but we will have Dylan back on and we'll do some deeper dives. Dylan is also from Louisiana. Both he and I are, like freaks. I mean, we grew up as like freaks in the in the community that we grew up in.
I don't doubt that.
Yeah.
But I mean that more about you than I do about Dylan.
Okay, so we're going to go back to the signs of hope.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So did they ever specify which website it will be?
No,
Mhm.
but
We're
it
building
is
one. LDH is building one.
it doesn't even say that. It's going to be an LDH website, and LDH has to approve the signs before they get hung up or like produced by nonprofit organizations and distributed to the health centers. So LDH has to approve the design, which hopefully somebody at LDH will be like, the mock-up is shite and you need to, rethink that.
Although, I mean, if the website is shite and it's just sending people to pregnancy centers, then I'm fine with the signs not being ones that like anyone is drawn towards,
Again, this is another thing where it's like we're passing legislation. It's really unclear what we're doing. And so, yeah, we're just going to have to like stay on top of it. And
Yeah, I mean, their plan is for LDH to build a new website. I can just guarantee you. I mean, whether
or
it's
just add the pregnancy centers
yeah,
to the
well,
existing one.
that's what I mean. I mean, but like that, there isn't something that I mean, again, there are resources that exist that fall into the category that they're talking about. There also used to be a shit more information on the LDH site about pregnancy centers.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's where this is going.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see.
All right. Well, and a good troll, and I don't know that we brought this up on the podcast. When we first talked about this bill being in committee on the Senate side, and Senator Katrina Jackson was requesting that the bill be amended to also include information about pregnancy prevention and STI testing and treatment. We talked a little bit about this priority being, on Katrina's agenda
Yeah.
on last week's podcast too. But so instead of amending the Signs of Hope bill, Senator Jackson Andrews just decided to introduce her own bill, Senate
She
Bill
said
501.
yeah, she said in that hearing that that's what she was going to
Mhm.
do. And sometimes people say that and they don't, which I mean, maybe they have good reason or maybe they just like didn't bother. So she did introduce a bill. I know that. What was
She did. It's
yeah,
Senate
what
Bill 501. And so it's basically the same, kind of construction. It's more targeted to post-secondary education. So colleges,
Right.
universities post the information promoting STI prevention, screening, and treatment. But
Did
yeah,
Katrina's bill pass?
it did.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting too, then. Okay, so then they'll be side by side at least, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. Like,
Maybe, I mean, it would
yeah.
be funny for LDH to say that I mean, why are we like making two different signs? Like just put them on the same side. And then
That's not gonna be on the sign that Ben Clapper gives them.
exactly. Well, that's what's so funny is that, yeah, then Ben Clapper would have to put the STI treatment stuff on the signs that he's going to fundraise to produce.
You know, the interesting thing to me substantively, which this is just occurring to me right now, that, so the reason that Katrina said in that hearing that she was going to make it only for colleges, so not for high school, it's not for minors, is that, it is important, at that stage for like parents to be involved, which is her long-standing view. I mean, and it
Hmm.
always makes me roll my eyes when we're talking about particularly things like this, like birth control, whatever. That, I mean, it's just not realistic in my opinion about parents are always being able to be involved. But she evolved on that this session. I mean,
So I think that what I would like to do is to work with some of our coalition partners that work in the STI prevention, screening, treatment space, like advocacy space. And like we should design our own posters to be hung up so that they look better
mhm.
and are more attractive. And thus, like more students in colleges and universities would be inclined to scan the QR code
Well,
for
I mean,
STI treatment and
yeah.
prevention than
The
these like,
reality is also, I mean, luckily, then it will be relevant to more people. Like,
yeah,
not everybody's pregnant in high school and college,
well, they
but
want them to be.
yeah, exactly, and that's what I mean. Luckily, I mean, you know, most people at some point during that time are sexually active.
Yeah.
So, the pregnancy and STI part is relevant to many, many people.
Mhm,
And the if you're already pregnant part, it's certainly relevant to some folks, but
mhm.
a smaller group.
Yeah, for sure.
Do
Okay,
we
well,
want
that
to talk about sorry, do we want to talk about what happened with that bill? I don't think this is with Presley.
oh, well, I was about to say that that's a good segue actually
Okay.
into the next topic, which is the parental rights agenda bills. So let's talk about House Bill 775 and then just let's update people on Amity's crazy bills. And like just to, touch base on those and where they ended up. Okay. So, House Bill 775, again, this is the requiring parental consent for minors for most medical treatment. The bill was heavily amended. We talked a lot about it last week. It was amended by Senator Katrina Jackson Andrews to allow minors to consent on their own to contraception, STI treatment, and testing. So when it goes to the Senate floor, Senator Presley introduced an amendment. So, Ellie, what was that amendment?
Well, so I didn't actually see it, so you'll have to tell people what he actually fucking said. I'm sure people sort of remember, but we had some concern that there would be attempts to just strip off Katrina's amendment or some level of fuckery about that amendment because, these crazy like right-wing Christian people like
Mhm.
don't want folks actually to be able to access contraception probably basically at all at any age. And with the STI stuff, they're just not interested in anything having to do with kids, sex, period. That actually did not happen. The amendment, generally speaking, stayed on the bill, which I do think is interesting, and that
Mhm.
is significant. As we've talked about, I think Genevieve wanted to get the goddamn bill passed, like
Mhm.
basically anything that it said. But fucking Presley, he proposed an amendment to carve out vaccines, though, STI vaccines, which I don't know if he specified. I mean, to everyone who knows, including me, took that to mean the HPV vaccine. I mean,
Mhm.
it's one of the only that I'm aware of, one of the only STIs where there is a vaccine to prevent it, not just, treatment or other preventative measures like condoms, whatever. So we do think it only affects the HPV vaccine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so whatever. So fucking Presley. So he proposes this. I want to hear you. You tell me and everyone else what it was that he said about it. But it did pass. So now, yes, we have this like good broad carve out to help people, be able to access care that they need, except for the HPV vaccine, which minors now will not be able to get without their parents' approval. And before we talk about what his logic was, whatever. I mean, because it's an anti-vax thing, also an anti-sex thing, I guess. I don't know. I mean, from a public health standpoint, which clearly he does not refer to public health experts. I mean, his controlled dangerous substance bill. I mean, that was like the public health world went wild, because he hadn't talked to anybody. This would be the same. I mean, like, the HPV vaccine was like an enormous breakthrough. In fact, you and I did not benefit from it when we were young. And basically everyone we know has had problems because of it. So HPV, can cause and often does cause cancer or, other sort of like ovarian, problems.
It's a leading
whatever.
cause of cervical cancer
Yeah.
among people. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's right. And it takes a long time to develop. It's easy to prevent with this vaccine. And it's like recommended basically by all public health professionals to give it to your kids early. It's a big breakthrough. In other words, that like if you give it to your kid, like any other vaccine, but while they're young and probably not yet sexually active, then you and they will never have to think about this. And they won't get fucking cancer because
they won't get cancer from HPV.
Correct.
But yeah.
That's what I was going to say. Yes. It's not a vaccine for all cancers, but it's a vaccine for the virus that will cause.
And it really is one of these like a sort of stealth STDs that
oh yeah. You don't know you have it.
Asymptomatic. Like you have no idea. You have no idea that you have it unless you specifically get tested for it.
The reality is though, anyone our age or older, and probably some younger too, everyone has it unless you've only had sex with one person and they've also only had sex with one person. I would put good money on there being a 90% chance you have it. So it's again, that's why the vaccine was a big deal. And it's also why with parental consent in this space, though, it's sort of particularly problematic because while most parents are going to understand, or a lot of parents are going to understand the value, even if they don't want to think about their children having sex. You also don't have to tell your kid, that this is it's a vaccine. Kids are used to taking vaccines, and they're pretty young at the time. So whatever. But that's what I worry about is that parents who are more conservative, parents who are more religious, parents who are just don't like birth control-ish kind of stuff and talking about that with their kids or dealing with it, that they are likely to not consent. So, those are the primary kinds of kids that you would want if they, got good information from their school or fucking watching the PSAs on TV that they could themselves get the, consent to the vaccine. But thanks to Senator Presley, that will not be true. What did he say?
Amendment 5 provides that there's an exception for a 17-year-old that is enrolled in college, but it clarifies that is not to include duly enrolled post-secondary education programs. And the 6th Amendment provides the exception for a provision of a vaccine for sexually transmitted diseases or infections that would have to have a parent's consent.
Senator Plessis for a question on the amendment.
Make sure I understand the exception with respect to the last one, with the exception of the provision of a vaccination for a sexual trans. So what does it mean that this is an exception to the bill?
So it's really an exception to an exception. In committee, and this is what we talked about yesterday with Senator Jackson and I, dealing with sexually transmitted diseases, Katrina and I worked together to come up with language that was acceptable. So it continues to allow for a discussion with a doctor, with a minor regarding contraception, and treatment of STIs.
Okay, so it allows for those conversations.
It allows for those conversations with the exception of discussion about the vaccine, which would have to have parental consent.
It was just like very nonchalant.
Yeah. That's, I mean, it was smart of him to do it that way. It's again like, you know, saying the word vaccine around there puts some people's hair up,
Yeah.
either themselves because they're fucking crazy, like the Amities of the world, or just people who have conservative constituents that they're like, I don't know what it is. So but it seems fine. Let's just vote against it. Like,
Yeah.
not, of course, him bothering or anybody else realizing that whether you're going to vote for it or not, that's one thing. But this is actually a big public health decision that's being made. So,
Yeah, it was interesting because Senator Duplessis was just trying to get clear on whether or not his amendment was, I think, removing the improvements that have been made to the bill over the course of this session.
He was probably concerned about, given what you're saying, which is also, again, with these people who are not trustworthy and transparent, is that what are these technical amendments? You're saying this is
Yep.
all just technical. Is well, what is it? I mean, what is it really doing? So he
Yep.
probably wasn't focused on the actual substantive thing that it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I'm just going to say, we say this often. This is why it's so important for advocates to have personal relationships with these legislators, because especially at the end of the session, there's so much going on. There's so much crazy shit happening. There's so much chicanery that's going on with amendments that those of us who are watching and paying attention and know what's happening, we're the best source of information for those people to be able to text them and be like, this is what this bill is now doing, this is what this amendment does. But
Oh, for sure. And stuff is happening fast. I mean, it's also not that, this is going to fall on deaf ears, of course, but it's also just why, in terms of legislative process, that they shouldn't do stuff on the floor, not post the amendments at all in advance. And I get it, and particularly at that stage of the session, that's all fine and good. But I mean, okay, man, who knows what the fuck you're going to be voting on? If that's how things work around, to some extent, it's like a slippery slope, They should all not really want that to happen, because then that's what's going to be happening, and everyone will end up getting screwed on that.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. Well, anyway, so the bill did pass with the stupid Presley amendment, but I mean, the long and short of it is we do not like that amendment, and that amendment sucks. And also, this bill is going to make it more difficult for vulnerable young people to access mental health care and medical care, especially transgender teens that are, dealing with this. So this is not a good piece of legislation, but it could have been so much worse.
Oh my God.
It could have been so much worse.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the third year that they've been trying to do it. I mean, there's so many carve-outs and so many changes that have been made since it started, because those things were unworkable. All the things we've talked about, what if a kid is under 18 but they're in college? What if a kid is in the care of their grandmother, now their whomever, who for sure, everyone would want to be able to for that person to consent to care, but they're not the parent, they're not the legal guardian. So all of those kinds of things that just made the whole thing just unworkable.
Yeah.
Then Chenevert, for the most part, I think, fixed. So it just leaves the sort of broad category of regular health care for people who don't have a legal guardian or don't have somebody that they trust. Did they take out the shit about
The reporting?
that they didn't?
No, so that's still in there, and that's super problematic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Earlier in the podcast, we had talked about these two bills by Representative Amity, House Bill 485, which was the the parental rights constitutional amendment, and then HB 948, which was about parents not getting in trouble if they refuse to consent to medical treatment for their children, even if it's cancer
Including
treatment.
chemotherapy. Yeah. Yeah, what happened with those bills?
Neither of those bills made it through because they're fucking crazy,
Oh,
obviously. I think what we're going to do is at some point this summer, we're going to do an entire episode on Representative Amity, because she's crazy. And I think that doing kind of like a profile of discouragement, I don't know, like, it's not a profile in courage, it's a profile of discouragement, where we're profiling these legislators to discourage people from continuing to support them as representatives in our legislature. Yeah. So,
I have to watch those hearings at some point, which will be like God knows when. That would say that I have a little free time and want to be amused. But I assume that the one with the cancer shit did not disappoint.
yeah, there was some interesting testimony, but I'll pull all of that when we go
Okay,
into a deep Amity dive, because she's
perfect.
crazy. Okay, MAGA agenda. All right, I have here just an update on the Charlie. Can't do it. I can't do it, Ellie.
Success sequencing? I think it's sequencing success
No,
though.
it's the Success Sequencing Act.
Which yeah, I keep thinking it's success sequencing, which actually is easier to say and I think makes more sense. But I like think it's a yeah, fucking Rick Edmonds sequencing success.
Okay, it made it out of committee, as we know, because Senator Mizell doesn't have balls, and she reluctantly voted for it. But it never actually got called from the calendar to be voted on by the full Senate.
Is it
Never did.
gonna is
It's dead.
it's
So what do you think happened here? And I don't know how much time we should spend on this, but it probably would have been very easy for Senator Edmonds to just say, you know what? I'm happy to amend the bill and take out the Charlie Kirk blah, 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 and just call it the Success Sequencing Act. And he could have easily passed that bill. There would have been no
yes,
problem with it.
and he was basically asked to do that in committee, which that is the sort of him being an asshole part, obviously. He wasn't running for Senate, he's running for Congress. So which he's in one of these races that he's gonna lose, but where like, he's just pulling some stunty kind of stuff to be the most conservative one. So I think that was probably a lot of the bang that he wanted to get out of calling it the Charlie Kirk blah blah blah. On the possibly giving him credit side,
Okay.
then I wonder if, either upon reflection or subsequent conversations with people like Katrina, that it did bother him that Black people actually don't like Charlie Kirk and think that he was racist and doing a lot of harm. I mean, Rick Edmonds might not have known that. He's like a very, he's as white as they come. He's like a pastor, I think, or some crap like that. I mean, and he's not like a bad man. I mean, I don't share his values on most things, but he's not like a bad, you know. So I don't know.
He's a useful idiot.
That's some speculation that maybe is giving him way too much credit, but I think he could have gotten it passed with the Charlie Kirk name too, as I guess also part of why I think that maybe, I mean, yes, he could have done the really simple thing and stopped calling it that. I mean, they just voted to disenfranchise the whole fucking Black Caucus. They were going to listen to them and not vote for, because of the name of the bill being. I mean,
It
so if he
seems to me
wanted to
that
get it through,
Cameron
he could have
Henry
done it.
probably would not have let this bill come to the floor with the Charlie Kirk thing,
I
and
don't know about that.
that maybe Edmonds either didn't care enough about this to keep pushing it, or like refuse to remove Charlie Kirk from the bill. I don't know. We should ask him. We'll ask him. We'll see what he says. We'll send him an email.
Yeah.
What happened with this bill?
Whatever the reason, once it became sort of toxic on both sides, he was smart to just not push it because it wasn't, I mean, even for him, it was kind of dumb.
Mhm.
And it's not directly related to forcing people to have babies against their will and trying to get them to give them up to religious people to raise. So,
Yes,
it
that's true.
wasn't that important.
Yeah. Okay. So also on the MAGA agenda, there were, as we talked about earlier in the beginning of the session, there were several bills to react to the protest at one church in Minneapolis.
Right.
And Louisiana legislators felt like they had to introduce like 8 pieces of agenda of like, of legislation to address this in Louisiana, where it's not a problem. But 2 of those ended up getting passed. One of them was Lori Schlegel's bill, House Bill 68. So this was about like including in the definition of what constitutes disturbing the peace, like disturbing religious worship, etc. That bill passed. It's been signed by the governor. It is a criminal offense and, includes
Yeah, I don't
penalties.
right. I can't remember all of these. That I think that one seemed the least problematic to me when we were going through them, but
It
both
did,
in
but
terms of
it did have
constitutionality.
enhanced criminal penalties. It was enhancing criminal penalties on disturbing the peace, and that stayed in. But yeah, it was not the most like it wasn't just like a if you just shout out something
Yeah,
in
it
that
didn't.
someone
Right.
could tackle you, beat the
I
shit
yeah.
out of
I think
you,
it
and
was
then
right.
charge you
Exactly.
for a crime.
Exactly. It was the only one, as I recall, that I thought didn't seem, yes, like incredibly vague and broad or otherwise unconstitutional.
So then the other one, which was, Senator Edmonds, was also about obstruction of the freedom of worship. So this was Senate Bill 306. That one also passed. I think there were some amendments to it, but in general, I mean, I think the amendments to it were trying to clarify definitions of what obstruction means. A big concern that was raised was that this could just be if someone was like protesting anywhere in the vicinity of a
Right.
church. And so I think that was resolved by some advocacy from folks from the ACLU.
I had concerns about that. Yeah, we talked about that. That
Yeah.
like, are we talking about inside even? Like or just yeah. I mean, people protesting for whatever reason outside.
Yeah. Okay. Then the other one, which is also by Senator Edmonds, I mean, I put it on the MAGA agenda, but it's more like a Project 2025 / tinfoil hat crazy people agenda. So this is Senate Bill 307, which authorizes the educational display of the 10 Commandments as a historical document. So we're going to build a monument to the 10 Commandments on the Capitol.
Yeah, and the Fifth Circuit's gonna be like, go for it. Like put the Ten Commandments everywhere.
I know. It's so ridiculous. Okay. As I said earlier, we're going to save some voting rights stuff that we're going to talk to Royce about next week. I did want to give one little update on something that happened with the redistricting bill, Senate Bill 121. So secretly, another provision was added to the legislation. This happened in a closed door meeting, and it was adopted very quickly without any public comment. But this provision will actually hide the number of quote unquote voided ballots that were cast in the election for House races, because that was still on the ballot when people went to vote in the primary. So
So what
the public won't be able to see how many votes were cast, who they were cast for, any of
what
the
it's just
votes
making it
cast.
what? They're just like it's not a public record? I guess I mean that's to try to make a court challenge harder, I would assume, is part of it on that basis. I mean,
Mhm.
we're just the general them looking like shit, like
But
it's
can't the
been one
court I
thing
mean, can't they subpoena? I mean, sure, it's not like a public record, but can't they subpoena that from the Secretary of State and a
that
court?
that's what I mean. I don't know what mechanism. I don't understand, what they did. Like they're saying that they have to be shredded and there can be no record of it. I don't know. That would be an interesting move.
Well, we can ask Royce. I mean, Royce
Yeah,
will
for sure.
understand this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be
Okay.
good. Yeah. Because yeah, I mean, I don't even know really. Maybe it's just really they're just worried about looking bad. I mean, another way it could make them look bad that may or may not particularly do anything in terms of a court challenge is just, people would want to know, like, what's the comparison? Like,
Mhm.
how many people voted last time? I mean, you're not going to be able to know person to person, but, people who understand data would be able to run some numbers to figure
Mhm.
that Because that was part of the whole excuse, of course, was like, well, we're not like voiding people. We're not taking their vote away. They can vote again next time. They just have to vote a second time. Wasn't that true? They have to vote a second time, which I mean, okay, but
But most people
inevitably
don't
then there
know.
will be
Gonna
differences.
go they're gonna go to maybe vote in the next election, which is the general, but it'll be the primary for the House, like, or we're having a special election for the primary. So then people like that's a standalone election. So are people going to show up to vote to that?
Oh,
And
for
then,
sure. It could,
like,
I mean, it
if
could
only like
undoubtedly make a
let's say
difference.
like 20,000 people show up for this standalone special primary election that they're now having to create because they have voided the
Mm.
previous one, but like 70,000 people voted in that
Yeah.
one.
Exactly. No, I think that there's a likelihood
It's
that there would
fucked
be
up.
a significant difference. Also,
Mhm.
because they're changing people's districts in the interim. So like that always makes it hard with short notice. People don't know where they're supposed to go. The reason may just be that it's that like, they thought it was probably going to make them look a little bit bad. So,
Yeah. I
why not
mean,
just pass some weird, like Trump. Yeah,
hide it
just
all,
like
hide it all.
hide all the evidence. Just hide
Yeah.
all the
All right. So I want to bring up something that we have not actually spent a lot of time talking about on the podcast, but is, I think, awesome and significant. So when you and I started Lift Louisiana in 2016, one of the priorities that we committed to taking on was the treatment of incarcerated women, particularly around pregnancy care and like health care, reproductive health care, because quite frankly, that was not something that any of the other advocacy organizations working in the prison reform, criminal justice reform space were really focused on, and we were concerned about it. So back in 2016, like we started this whole process of investigation, and we did we did several study resolutions over that period of
but
time.
but those were for a real purpose.
They
Yeah.
were for a real
That's
purpose.
why, I mean, I made the caveat before. I mean, sometimes, I mean, study resolutions can be really
Mhm.
necessary, not and then also useful.
Yeah. So we tried to investigate ourselves what is happening with shackling. The more official term is like the use of restraints on pregnant women. We found it very difficult to get information from the jails in
Well, to be
particular.
clear, because people were not complying with the public records law.
They
Yeah.
were not.
Yeah.
Yes.
Again, part of why, I mean, that in terms of when a study resolution can be useful, then I mean, we had a remedy with that. We could have started suing a
Mhm.
bunch of jails. But like that's very expensive and time consuming, I mean, so unless you are an organization that is what you're doing is is just the government transparency part, as opposed to this is part of what we're doing, but really it's actually for a different policy goal, then it was going to be like slow, ineffective, and expensive. But with getting the government to do some of that researching of themselves, then you can, get through that bottleneck basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we ended up doing was we worked with Representative Landry. We took some of the research that we had done to her, and we were like, several bills, including the shackling bill, have been passed over the last 20 years or so to try to improve conditions for women, incarcerated women. But like, we don't really know what's happening with that. Some of them apply to jails and prisons. Some of them only apply to state facilities, which would be the prisons. But do they apply to the people that the Louisiana Department of Corrections is holding in local jails? And if that policy should apply to them, then why doesn't it apply broadly? Well, we had a lot of questions about like what is going on.
Right.
So we designed a study resolution to ask the Louisiana legislative auditor, who we've talked about before, and they did an incredible report. Basically, all of the laws that we have passed are not being complied with by the jails, and they also released a lot of really, really, really strong recommendations for policy changes to address those issues. That legislative audit report came out in the middle of last year's legislative
Right.
session. So, like, nobody saw it. So, we brought it to the attention of several of the female legislators. We were able to advocate for it to get put on the agenda of legislative women's caucus, and it horrified some of our legislators, which is great because I mean it's not great that they didn't know, and it's not great that the policy implementation is so bad that they were horrified, but it's great that they cared enough about this to step up and do something this session. So I want to talk about two pieces of legislation that were introduced as a result of our work with Mandy Landry and with the Women's Caucus. So the first one is Senate Bill 470. So this was introduced by Senator Beth Mizell, and it's pretty interesting. Like, this things that she decided to take on were shackling, but then also just like, should we be putting pregnant women in
Yeah.
jail in general?
Right, and particularly, it seems like one of the things based on where she landed is, like, for drug use, you
Yeah.
know? I mean,
Yeah.
which is
Nonviolent crimes.
that's right,
Yeah.
and particularly with I mean, there's lots of legitimate debate about whether throwing people in jail who are addicted to drugs, using a carceral response to that is the right response anyway, again, from, like, a public health standpoint. Like, that's probably not I mean, it's definitely not the best intervention. And then with pregnant people, then, obviously there's other issues like the fact that they're fucking pregnant. So should they really be in jail at all? And they really need timely treatment. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming that's a lot of what was motivating her. Like, Beth woke now. Like, I mean, which I'm sure will not be true. And it actually, that is sort of the original definition of it. She saw something and it, like,
Yeah.
shocked her into
Woke up.
consciousness. Yeah. So anyway, explain. You should explain a little bit more. But it's a not just a good bill, but like it shows some real like some real like interest in learning more about a complicated topic and willingness to like take a policy position that some people would think seems too outlandish, basically.
I mean, the bill has a lot of different parts, but I mean, fundamentally, what she understood is that women are still being handcuffed to beds while
Yeah.
giving birth, and that
Yep.
that is completely unacceptable. And so she offers some changes to the procedures around that, but also changes to reporting requirements, and
Mhm.
also that people should be made aware of what their rights are, what the law is
Yes.
regarding that.
We talked about that a lot back in the
Which
day.
that was a
Yes.
huge part of, like, that was a huge part of what we wanted to do with a lot of these reforms, is to not just make this a law, but make people have to tell people who were gonna be impacted by it that this was a law. This was now a right. This was something that, like,
Yeah. This is
that could not be weaponized against them, you
Yeah,
know?
and this is why in lots of contexts, like in workplaces, in terms of, like, health and safety or work and hour, wage and hour issues, or
Mhm.
like with HIPAA, that, things that are kind of like in the weeds, but are like really, like big statutes out there that are supposed to protect people in settings that everyone basically encounters, it's the law that those notices have to be provided.
This is where I think that these study resolutions can actually be really impactful, because they're providing information that gives legislators some tools to, one, inform them about things that they're not really aware of, provide some policy recommendations, and like support them in advocating for those kind of reforms. And this is an
There's no
example
doubt.
that
Yeah.
really worked.
Yeah, and again, where as we were talking about before, I mean, this is exactly the kind of issue where it's like it's hard for people to figure out. It's a not very transparent environment. That's also why the legislative auditor is really important with financial audits of stuff. It's like just other people are not going to be able to access the information very easily, and or it's a big system. So like this is the perfect sort of way to do it. And I think with her legislation too, then part of what it's doing is getting people out of jail and into treatment, getting people
Yeah.
drug addicted pregnant people out of jail and into treatment. So that's like again, that's a very progressive like approach, and it is absolutely one that, will pay off.
So obviously there was, a lot of other random shit that has happened in this legislative session, but the big things we're going to have some guests on to talk to us about. And like I said, next week we're going to have Senator Royce Duplessis come and talk to us about voting rights, redistricting, and all of that bullshit. Until then, Ellie, what are the people supposed to do?
You're supposed to subscribe, but also rate and review. Send us some comments. And don't watch this episode on YouTube. Then people maybe will. I look horrible. If you're already at the end, you've either watched it on YouTube or not, I guess. So
Too late.
yeah, exactly.
It's too late to save yourself.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so that's it. Rate, review, and subscribe. It's almost officially summer, which I don't know if that meaning is meaningful at all. It will not really be meaningful.
I mean,
with
it's summer
my
to me
schedule.
because I was just trying to smoke a cigarette outside earlier and I was pouring sweat. I couldn't even get
It-
through like a 10-minute cigarette without
No
like
shit.
dying.
I mean, like we all like no shit. I had the same experience at like 7:45 this morning. Then I was getting back to work after a late night of work, and so was gonna go outside and smoke a cigarette. And I was like, "How hot is it?" Because I'm always like cold inside, so I'm wearing sweaters and stuff. I was like, "How hot is it out already? I can probably wear like this light little sweater." I look at my phone; it was 82 and feels like 90. I was like, "Yeah, okay, we're officially like into it." It's 7:45 a.m. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm hung up on you were up and doing stuff at 7:45 a.m., but you still can't manage to join the podcast on time. Like,
I am busy, Michelle. So fuck you.
all right. Well, I
All
love
right.
you.
Yes, love you too. And thanks, listeners.
Seriously is presented by Lift Louisiana, a nonprofit organization advocating for reproductive health rights and justice.